Good evening and welcome to a special Zoom in on a fresh conversation for Black History Month. So for this month, as much as my time will allow, I'm going to kind of reach out to the authors that have made an impact in my life and have been around for a very, very long time. These are people who everybody believes that, you know, they didn't spend time in the game. Listen, you guys don't understand. A lot of us have been out here in the game for a very, very long time. I have been in the industry since 2008, and I know friends now who are friends, authors who are friends, who were in the game 10 and 15 years before that. And so what I want to tell the young authors is, it may look like an overnight success, but these people that I'm going to highlight this month have really crafted what they do. They have taken the time to make mistakes. They have taken the time to share the mistakes. They have taken the time to take classes. And this is so important to know that the writer you were then is not the writer you are now, but the writer that you were then crafted the writer that you are now. And tonight, I'm just going to take a moment to give homage to my good friend, Brian W. Smith. This was his first novel. It's called The Swap Game. So I was at an MLK event, and a friend of mine gave me this book and said, "Have you read that?" And I said, "No, I can't believe it, but I don't think I've ever read this book by Brian W. Smith." And then I got maybe 20 pages into it, and yeah, I've read this book before, but it was so long ago that I decided to read it again. And now I have two copies on my bookshelf, and thank you so much, Brian. I will cherish them both. And so he has been in this game for almost 20 years. This book was written back in 2006, and he has, I don't know how many other books he has now, a lot. And he can be reached at on Facebook, of course, and then he has a website that you can go to. But Brian, when I met him, it was in DeLand, and shout out to Primrose. She had a book club at the time. I think it was called Woman to Woman, and Davita Bonner. And they invited me there. It was my first time at a session with the book club. And I met Brian. Now, Brian knew full well that I was a novice at this, but he was so generous with his time and has been ever since with his time and his talent. And so I just want to pay homage to him tonight. And so for the month, I will be picking other people who have, played an impact in my life. Janice Kearney, I mean, there's just so many, but, and take a moment to read just a little bit from one or two of their novels. So this one is The Swap Game. It was the first book he's ever written. I'm not sure you still get copies. It's been so long, but you certainly can reach out to him. And if there's a way to get copies, he will certainly get a copy for you. So I'm going to read the prelude to The Swap Game. And the main characters are Malik, Stacy, Sheila, and Darnell. And Some Games Shouldn't Be Played by Brian W. Smith. Can you see that? Yeah, I think you can. Right there, right there. So hard in these lights. Anyway, it's called The Swap Game. So this is the prelude. As they sat in the soft leather seat in Dr. Trishell's Strong's huge office, supposedly searching for ways to save their marriage, all Malik could think about was getting out of there. He and Sheila had only visited a marriage counselor once during their 13-year marriage, and he vowed to never go to another session. Maybe it was annoying because the last marriage counselor they went to kept sniffling. Or maybe could be that the way the counselor kept making Malik explain his actions. But nevertheless, Sheila confronted him on every level. It's more likely that Malik's dislike stemmed from the age-old viewpoint that seems to be embedded in the minds of most Black men. It makes no sense to pay someone to listen to your problems. Rather than pay a marriage counselor $100 an hour, most Black men will resort to confiding in Old Faithful, the philosophical wino that still sits under the willow tree in the old neighborhood yard, who will give quality counseling sessions for a pint of whiskey and a pack of cigarettes. Hell, you throw in 2 packs of cigarettes and he'll tell you what's wrong with the government and how to change and start your car. No, not a college-educated person, but counselors nevertheless. Malik agreed to attend this counseling session. Hell, he had even set up this session with the beautiful Dr. Strong. As Dr. Strong sat in her chair trying to convince Malik and Sheila that they were making progress, Malik couldn't help but stare at that well-defined curve in the doctor's long, beautiful legs. Dr. Strong was about 5'8" tall, light brown complexion, hazel eyes, and had long brown hair, layered and perfectly cut. Her striking beauty was complemented by her video hoochie figure, and the good doctor may have had some photos out there that I was going to look for. This was brothers creating marriage problems just sitting here looking at her. Dr. Strong wore a pair of square-toed brown high-heeled shoes matching her brown skirt and a tan-colored silk shirt with large collars that lay perfectly on the labels of her tailored brown blazer. Her French tip fingernails were perfectly manicured, and her hair bounced and swayed freely with every turn of her head. Even Oprah would have been jealous. She walked, talked, smiled, and sat with the confidence that only good self-esteem could produce. There should probably be some type of law against a sister like this doing marriage counseling. Her mere presence was a conflict of interest. Never was the distraction more evident than when Dr. Strong was in Malik's presence. There were times when he could barely look at her in the eyes when he talked. Some women just have a way of clouding a brother's mind. Truth be told, it didn't take much to cloud Malik's mind because he'd already decided to get out of this marriage. He was just going to the marriage counselor for just going through the motions. Each visit was difficult for Sheila because she could see how emotionally detached Malik had become. The hurt she felt was compounded by the way Malik drooled when he was in the doctor's office. Malik had never been this blatantly disrespectful to Sheila. He spent the majority of their marriage trying to give her the world. Now, the only thing he wanted to give her was a divorce decree. By the way, Malik acted. You would think that Sheila was the scum of the earth, but nothing could have been further from the truth. Sheila was attractive in her own right. Her dreamy brown eyes accentuated her dark, silky skin. She didn't have the video hoochie figure and high maintenance style of dress that Dr. Strong flaunted, but she was a solid 5'5" tall and about 140 pounds. Her curves could be attributed more to the cornbread and collard greens she ate while growing up in the South, rather than a strict 5-a-day workout regimen at a fancy gym. She preferred wearing the types of comfortable, inexpensive clothes that could be found on the clearance rack at TJ Maxx or Steinmark, a stark contrast to Dr. Strong's wearing DKNY designer suits and Chanel bags. On the fine meter, Sheila may not have registered as a dime, but she was a strong, as a 9, but she was a strong 8. Unfortunately, her self-esteem struggled to reach the 6th level, which made her feel more like a 5. Every time she looked at Dr. Strong, she felt inadequate in many ways. If it had been left up to her, they wouldn't have sought the services. They would have sought the services of an old person, an old white man for counseling. But Malik chose Dr. Strong, and even a blonde man could see why. Malik first met the educated beauty through a mutual friend at a wine tasting event 6 months earlier. They exchanged business cards and spoke on the phone a few times, but that was just about it. When he and Sheila started having marital problems, Malik remembered that Dr. Strong was a clinical psychologist that specialized in marriage counseling. Malik knew that before the courts could grant him a divorce, he and Sheila would have to seek counseling anyway. Therefore, in typical one-track-minded male fashion, Malik figured he would have to sit, if he had to sit and tell his problems, he might as well enjoy the scenery. As they sat there waiting to be instructed on what their next marital move should be, the tension between the unhappy couple permeated throughout the office. Sheila sat silently with water in her eyes, looking down at her feet while Malik displayed a lack of concern that bordered on arrogance. Dr. Strong had spent the last 10 years mastering her trade, so it wasn't hard for her to pick up on the body language. This was their fourth session with this couple, and their body language was still on trial. So Malik, what do you think the two of you can do to regain your passion for each other? Dr. Strong asked. I don't know. Ask her, he replied mockingly. Sheila continued to sit quietly as the droplets of water that had built up in her eyes began to stream down her beautiful brown face. Every time they went to a session, she started crying a river. The more she cried, the more annoyed Malik became. Well, what you gotta say, he barked. If you stop crying for a moment, maybe you can tell the good doctor here how we really how we really got to this point. Sheila continued to sit there silently as she stared at the Berber carpet that covered the floor of Dr. Strong's beautiful decorated office. It was as if Malik's scathing remark released gallons of bottled up emotions inside of her because the tears started flowing like Niagara Falls. Dr. Strong seemed surprised at Sheila's sudden burst of emotion. She was equally surprised at the lack of concern that Malik displayed. Malik, what's going on? Dr. Strong asked, with an intense look on her face. I suspected there were things you guys weren't telling me. Now I'm convinced. The only way I can help the two of you save this marriage is if you both are candid about your relationship. She said it in a scathing tone as she took a napkin and wiped the tears from Sheila's face. Doc, we don't have enough time to talk about everything that got us here. You let me worry about the time. I will purposely schedule you guys last because I want to help you. I won't be here next week, and I don't think you guys can handle another 2 weeks in this condition. We're not leaving here until we get to the bottom of this. Okay, since my wife is obviously too emotional to speak, I'll tell you what really brought us here. About 2 years ago, I got a job. It was a job that took us financially to another level. That's just the prelude. So if you would like to read the rest of The Swap Game by Brian W. Smith, very well written. It is a, maybe a two-nighter. That's if you don't stay up all night like I do reading it. Brian, thank you. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. And thank you for being a part of my Black history and literacy. And we will see you in another couple of days when we will reach out again and pay homage to the ones who have come before us and the ones who are riding with us right now. So thank you very much. This has been a special edition of Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation. Good night.